Have you ever watched the people who raised you turn your happiest day into a public execution? I have. My name is Elara Bennett. I'm 31, and for most of my life, people thought being the daughter of a rich CEO meant I had everything. They saw the cars, the glass mansion on the hill, the family name printed on office towers, charity boards, hospital wings, and business magazines. They saw my father, Malcolm Bennett, standing on stages in $1,000 suits, talking about loyalty, legacy, and family values. What they didn't see was the way he measured love like stock value. And on the day I married a man he called beneath us, he stood in front of 180 guests, raised a glass of champagne, and cut me off from the family. No trust fund, no company shares, no family support, no daughter. That was the exact word he used. My mother lowered her eyes like she was grieving. My brother smirked like he had been waiting years to watch me fall. And my new husband, Daniel, stood beside me in his simple navy suit, holding my hand like the whole room didn't just turn into a courtroom. My father thought he had ruined me. 6 months later, he walked into the biggest investor meeting of his career and found me sitting at the opposite end of the table. Not as his daughter. As the woman who now controlled the deal that could save his company. Welcome back to drama and revenge stories, where the people who think they buried you eventually realize they only planted you deeper. If you've ever been humiliated by family and still found the strength to stand, this story is for you. Tell me where you're watching from and stay with me, because the moment my father finally understood what he had done was quieter than I expected, but far more satisfying. Let me take you back to the dinner where my father decided my future belonged to him. It was a Friday evening at Bennett House, though calling it a house always felt dishonest. It had marble floors, a private elevator, 2 kitchens nobody in the family used, and windows tall enough to make even the sky look rented. My father sat at the head of the dining table, exactly where he always sat, beneath a chandelier my mother once said had been shipped from Italy. He liked sitting under expensive things. It made him feel chosen. Across from me sat Adrian Cole, the man my father had selected for me like a board appointment. Adrian was handsome in the polished way. Men are handsome when they have never had to wonder whether rent would clear. His family owned hotels, warehouses, and enough politicians to make dinner conversation dangerous. My father lifted his wine glass and said, "Adrian's father and I have been discussing a partnership." I already knew where this was going. He never invited people to dinner. He placed them. A partnership, I repeated. My mother gave me a small warning look, the kind she had perfected over decades. Smile. Be polite. Don't embarrass us. My father smiled without warmth. Business becomes easier when families align. Adrian looked at me like I was a signature waiting at the bottom of a contract. I set down my fork carefully. I had learned long ago that if I moved too fast around my father, he called it emotion. If I spoke too loudly, he called it disrespect. If I disagreed, he called it immaturity. "I'm engaged," I said. The room changed. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough. My brother Julian stopped cutting his steak. My mother's fingers tightened around her napkin. Adrian blinked once, as if I had spoken in another language. My father stared at me. To whom? Daniel Reyes. There was no recognition in his face. That was the first crime Daniel committed in my father's world. He was unknown. He works in community development, I said. That was the second crime. He worked. Not inherited. Not managed. Not chaired. Worked. My father leaned back in his chair. And what does that mean? Exactly. It means he helps rebuild neglected neighborhoods, housing projects, small business grants, infrastructure planning. Julian laughed under his breath. My father did not. He looked at me the way he looked at failing departments. Legacy is not built on charity work, Elara. No, I said softly. Sometimes it's built by people who actually care about what they leave behind. My mother closed her eyes. That was how I knew I had gone too far. My father stood up slowly, placed both palms on the table, and looked down at me. "You will end this engagement." I looked at him for a long second. No, the word was small. But in that house, it sounded like a window breaking. He smiled then. Not because he was amused. Because he had already decided how he would punish me. You have no idea how expensive that word is. I did not answer. Because sometimes silence is the only thing you can afford before a war begins. Daniel and I met 8 months earlier in a place my father would never have entered unless there were cameras waiting. It was a half-abandoned community center on the east side of the city, with peeling paint, broken ceiling tiles, and children's drawings taped over cracks in the walls. I had gone there because my company, not my father's, mine, had quietly funded a small literacy program through a nonprofit. Nobody in my family knew about it. They thought I spent my free time attending brunches and pretending to enjoy women who measured their worth in handbags. Daniel was on a ladder fixing a light fixture when I arrived. He had dust on his shirt, paint on his wrist, and the kind of focus that made the room feel steadier. "You must be Miss Bennett," he said, climbing down. "Elara," I corrected. "Daniel?" He shook my hand like he meant it. Not too soft, not too eager, not trying to prove anything. That was the first thing I liked about him. He didn't perform respect. He simply gave it. Over the next few months, I saw him repair doors, calm, angry parents, talk teenagers out of giving up, and sit on the floor with children who trusted him more than they trusted most adults. He didn't have my father's money, but he had something my father's money had never bought: presence. Daniel listened when people spoke. He remembered names. He noticed when someone had gone quiet. He believed dignity belonged to everyone, not just the people who could afford to decorate it. The first time he asked about my family, I told him the truth. My father owns Bennett Global. He paused for half a second. Then he said, "Okay, that was it. No questions about money, no change in tone, no sudden interest, just okay." I almost cried right there in the parking lot because I realized how rare it was to be seen without being priced. When Daniel proposed, it wasn't in a restaurant with candles or violin music. It was on the roof of the community center after a fundraiser, with plastic chairs stacked behind us and city lights flickering in the distance. He didn't kneel dramatically. He just took my hand and said, "I can't promise you an easy life, but I can promise you that you will never have to shrink to fit inside mine." I said yes before he finished breathing. My father had Daniel investigated within 48 hours. Of course he did. Men like my father don't ask questions because they want answers. They ask because they want weapons. He called me to his office on the 42nd floor of Bennett Global, where the carpet was thick enough to hide footsteps and the windows made the city look like something he owned. A file waited on his desk. Daniel Reyes, printed in black ink. My father opened it like he was reading a diagnosis. 34. No inherited wealth. No corporate position. Mother deceased. Father absent. Student loans paid off late. Lives in a rented apartment. Works with nonprofits. He looked up. "This is the man you want to marry?" "Yes! He has nothing!" I smiled then, because I had finally understood the poverty my father feared most. Not the lack of money, the lack of control. He has character. My father laughed once. A cold, sharp sound. Character does not protect you from reality. "No," I said. "But money doesn't protect you from becoming cruel." His face changed, just slightly. "Enough. Careful, Elara." I stood. "I have been careful my whole life." He closed the file. "If you marry him, you leave this family with nothing." I looked around his office. The art, the glass, the expensive silence, the empire he had built and called love whenever it suited him. Then I looked back at him. Maybe nothing is what I need to finally breathe. The wedding was supposed to be small. A garden venue. White chairs. A string quartet because Daniel's aunt insisted. My friends from the nonprofit. Some old college friends. A few relatives who still had enough spine to show up without asking my father's permission. But my father arrived like a storm wearing a tuxedo. Not alone. He brought executives. Business partners. Society friends. People I had seen my whole life at charity galas pretending to care about causes they used as decorations. My mother came in pale blue, looking tragic and beautiful, like she had practiced suffering in the mirror. Julian came with his wife and his phone already out. I should have known then. My father was not there to bless me. He was there to make sure the punishment had witnesses. During the ceremony, Daniel's hand was warm in mine. His vows were simple. He said he loved the way I fought for people who had no microphones. He said he loved my stubborn heart. He said home was not a place, but the person who made you feel safe when the world became loud. I almost forgot my father was there. Almost. At the reception, everything felt fragile, like happiness made of glass. Then my father stood. A spoon tapped against crystal. The room went quiet. That is what rooms do for men with money. He lifted his glass and smiled. "My daughter has always been independent," he began. Some people laughed softly. Not because it was funny. Because rich men train people to laugh at the right time. She has always believed she knows better than the people who sacrificed for her. My chest tightened. Daniel's thumb moved once across my knuckles. Steady. My father continued. "Today, she has chosen love over legacy. Sentiment over security. A man with no name over a family that gave her everything." My mother looked down. Julian was recording. Daniel stood very still. My father turned toward me. "So let me make this clear in front of everyone who matters." He paused. He loved pauses. They made cruelty look ceremonial. As of today, Elara Bennett is no longer connected to Bennett Global, Bennett Family Holdings, or any inheritance attached to my name. She has chosen an ordinary life, and she may now live it without extraordinary support. The room froze. I heard someone gasp. I heard the fountain behind us. I heard my own heartbeat, slow and heavy. Then he said the part I never forgot. I no longer have a daughter in any meaningful sense. My mother covered her mouth, not to stop him, to improve the scene. People stared at me, waiting. That is what humiliation does in public. It turns pain into entertainment. They wanted tears, a collapse, a dramatic exit, something they could whisper about later over wine. But I did not give them that. I stood. Not quickly, not shakily. I stood like the floor belonged under my feet. Daniel rose beside me. My father looked satisfied, like he had finally returned order to the room. I picked up my glass, though my hand was not drinking hand steady. It was survival steady. "You're right, Dad," I said. His smile widened. "You gave me many things." I looked around the room. The best schools, the right clothes, the correct manners, a last name people reacted to before they reacted to me. Then I looked directly at him. But love was never one of them. The silence deepened. My mother's eyes filled with tears. Real or rehearsed, I still don't know. "You taught me that money can open doors," I said. "Daniel taught me that character decides what you do once you walk through them." Someone shifted in their chair. My father's jaw tightened. "And if losing your money is the price of keeping my self-respect," I said, "then this is the cheapest I have ever felt free." Daniel squeezed my hand. Then he turned to my father. He did not raise his voice. He did not insult him. He simply said, "We don't need you." 4 words. Plain. Calm. Final. My father laughed because that was the only way he knew to hide surprise. "You don't need me?" he said. "You work out of charity offices and rented spaces." Daniel nodded. For now. It was such a small answer, but something in his tone made my father pause, just for a second. A tiny crack appeared in his certainty. He didn't know then. None of them did. They didn't know that Daniel and I had spent months working on a housing redevelopment proposal that had attracted private investors from 3 states. They didn't know that the nonprofit was only one branch of a larger community investment firm I had built quietly after leaving my father's shadow. They didn't know that while Julian was posing in boardrooms, I had been studying contracts, meeting city planners, negotiating land rights, and building relationships with people my father dismissed because they didn't wear watches expensive enough to impress him. They didn't know that one of Bennett Global's largest upcoming projects depended on zoning support from the very district Daniel and I had helped revive. They didn't know because they never asked what I did when I wasn't being useful to them. That night, after my father left with half the room trailing behind him like frightened birds, the wedding became smaller and better. Daniel's aunt turned up the music. My college roommate kicked off her heels. The caterer served food my mother would have called simple, and I ate more than I had eaten at any family dinner in years. At midnight, Daniel and I stood under string lights, married, cut off, and strangely peaceful. "Are you scared?" he asked. "Yes," I said. He nodded. "Me too." That was another thing I loved about him. He didn't pretend courage meant feeling nothing. He knew courage meant moving anyway. The first month was hard. Not movie hard. Real hard. The kind where you check your account balance before buying groceries. The kind where old friends stop replying because your last name no longer provides access. The kind where invitations disappear and people say things like, "I hope you understand." I understood perfectly. I had been loved on credit, and my father had closed the account. My mother called once. She cried softly and said, "You know how your father is?" I said, "Yes. That's why I left." She told me I had broken his heart. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because my mother had spent 30 years confusing a man's pride with a heart. Julian posted a photo from the company gala 2 weeks later. Caption: "Family loyalty matters." I didn't respond. Silence can be a luxury too. Instead, I worked. Daniel worked. We met with contractors, city officials, investors, tenant groups, small business owners, and exhausted mothers who just wanted their children to grow up somewhere clean and safe. We built the proposal slowly, properly. Every figure checked, every risk addressed, every promise tied to a plan. No glossy lies, no charity language. Real numbers, real impact. By the 4th month, our project had a name: Harbor Renewal Initiative. By the 5th month, we had secured enough backing to be taken seriously. By the 6th month, Bennett Global was in trouble, not publicly at first. That is how wealthy families bleed, quietly. behind press releases. A coastal development project my father had announced years earlier was facing legal delays, community resistance, investor anxiety, and a financing gap large enough to make even Bennett Global sweat. The board wanted a solution. The investors wanted stability. The city wanted guarantees. And the district council wanted one thing before approving the next phase: a community partnership with proven local leadership. That leadership was us. I found out from an email forwarded by one of our advisors. Bennett Global has requested a joint presentation. I read the sentence 3 times. Then I laughed. Not loudly. Not cruelly. Just enough to let the girl who had been humiliated at her own wedding know that she had survived long enough to see the shape of justice. Daniel stood behind me and read over my shoulder. "Well," he said, "that's going to be awkward." The meeting took place in a downtown conference hall with black leather chairs, glass walls, and a city view my father would have appreciated if he hadn't been too busy trying not to panic. There were 14 people at the table. Board members, investors, legal counsel, city representatives, and my father. He walked in last, as usual. Then he saw me. For the first time in my life, Malcolm Bennett had no prepared expression. His eyes moved from my face to the nameplate in front of me. Elara Reyes, Director, Harbor Renewal Initiative. The room did not gasp. Real power rarely needs sound effects. It just sits there and lets people understand. My father stopped walking. Julian, who had come as part of Bennett's executive team, nearly bumped into him. My mother was not there. She never came to rooms where consequences were not dressed as sympathy. "Miss Reyes," one of the investors said warmly, "we're very glad you could join us, Miss Reyes." Not Bennett. Not Malcolm's daughter. Mine. I stood and shook hands around the table. When I reached my father, he hesitated, just long enough. Then he took my hand. His palm was cold. "Elara," he said. "Mr. Bennett," I replied. The smallest thing. The sharpest thing. The presentation began. Daniel spoke first. Calm, clear, precise. He walked them through housing impact, job creation, neighborhood stability, local contractor commitments, and risk reduction. Then I took over. I showed the financial model, the legal pathway, the investor protections, the community agreements. Every number was clean. Every weakness had already been answered. Every concern had a page. My father stared at the screen like it had betrayed him, because it had my fingerprints on it. After 20 minutes, one board member leaned forward. "Miss Reyes, if Bennett Global partners with Harbor, how soon can approvals move?" Assuming full compliance and community protections, I said, within 90 days. My father inhaled. 90 days meant survival. 90 days meant investors stayed. 90 days meant the empire did not crack in public. "And without your partnership?" another investor asked. I looked at my notes, then at my father. Realistically, 12 to 18 months. Possibly longer if opposition escalates. The room went very quiet. There it was. Not revenge wrapped in screaming. Not revenge with broken glass. Just the truth, placed gently on the table where everyone could see it. My father cleared his throat. "This is a strong proposal," he said. The words looked painful leaving his mouth. I nodded. "Thank you." He shifted. "Perhaps we should discuss terms privately," I smiled. "No!" His eyes flicked up. I kept my voice professional. Given Bennett Global's history with community commitments, transparency will be necessary. All terms should remain visible to the board, investors, and city representatives. A board member nodded. My father's face tightened. He understood. I was not punishing him. That would have been easier for him to dismiss. I was holding him accountable. There is a difference. For the next hour, we negotiated. Not father and daughter. Not rich man and discarded child. Professionals. And that seemed to disturb him more than anger ever could have. When the meeting ended, the board voted to proceed under Harbor's terms. Local hiring guarantees. Affordable housing protections. Independent oversight. Profit limits on certain units. Community reinvestment requirements. Every clause my father would have mocked 6 months earlier became the rope that pulled his project back from collapse. People shook my hand, congratulated Daniel, thanked us for our work. My father stood near the window, alone. For once, the view did not belong to him. As we were leaving, he said my name, not loudly. "Elara," I stopped. Daniel waited beside me. My father looked older than he had at the wedding, not broken. Men like him do not break easily, but smaller somehow, like the room had finally measured him without his money standing in front. "I didn't know," he said. That was all. 3 words. Weak ones. Convenient ones. I looked at him. You didn't ask. His mouth opened, then closed. For a second, I saw something almost human behind his pride. Regret, maybe. Or fear of losing control forever. I was trying to protect the family, he said. No, I said softly. You were trying to protect the version of the family that made you feel powerful. He looked down. The great Malcolm Bennett, CEO, donor, boardroom king, finally silent. I'm still your father, he said. And there it was, the last card, blood. As if blood could erase what he had done in front of witnesses. I held Daniel's hand. No, I said. You're the man who announced he no longer had a daughter. His face tightened. I was angry. I was married. The words landed between us. Simple, heavy, unchangeable. He looked at Daniel then, and for the first time, not like he was furniture in the wrong room. Like he was a man. Daniel gave him nothing but calm. That was his gift and his weapon. My father turned back to me. What do you want? I almost smiled. Because 6 months earlier, he thought the answer would always be money. I want you to honor the contract, I said. I want you to stop treating communities like chess pieces. I want every promise in that proposal fulfilled. And I want you to understand that you didn't make me strong by cutting me off. I stepped closer. You only gave me less weight to carry. He looked away first. That was the apology I got. Not words, not tears, not a dramatic embrace. Just my father looking away because the truth had finally become too expensive to stare at. 3 weeks later, Bennett Global announced the partnership publicly. My father stood on a stage beside Daniel and me, smiling for cameras like it had all been his idea. But this time, everyone knew better. The press called Harbor Renewal the missing piece in Bennett Global's recovery. Investors praised our leadership. The city signed off. And my brother Julian, who had once recorded my humiliation at my wedding, now had to clap from the front row while reporters asked me questions he couldn't answer. My mother sent flowers. White roses. No note. I placed them in the lobby of the community center. The children used the ribbon for an art project. That felt right. People ask me sometimes if revenge felt good. And the honest answer is no. Not in the way they expect. It didn't feel like fire. It felt like air. Like finally standing in a room where nobody could rewrite me. Like hearing my own name without his shadow attached. Like realizing that being cut off from the wrong people can feel a lot like being set free. My father still runs Bennett Global. I still run Harbor. We speak when business requires it. He calls me Miss Reyes in meetings now. The first time he did, Daniel looked down at his notes to hide a smile. I didn't hide mine. Because sometimes the best revenge is not destroying the people who hurt you. Sometimes it is becoming so impossible to dismiss that they have to say your name with respect. And if you're listening to this while someone in your life is telling you that you are nothing without them, hear me clearly. Let them cut the rope. Let them close the door. Let them take back every gift they used as a chain. Then build something with your own hands. Quietly. Carefully. So well that one day, when they need a way back into the future, they find you standing at the entrance. Not begging. Not crying. Not waiting. Holding the keys.